Tonight, we are continuing in part 2 of our new series that we just kicked off called In the Beginning. And in this series, what we're doing is we're looking at the creation account of Genesis chapter 1, and we're seeing what we can learn about how that creation account parallels God's transforming work in each one of our lives. Because here's kind of where we began the first week. If you can put that slide up, Allie. We began the first week with this, that the God who shaped the world, do we have that slide? There you go. The God who shaped the world is still shaping hearts. So as we read the creation account, what we see is we see a powerful, omniscient, incredible, creative, and good God literally shaping the cosmos with his voice. And here's the thing about God, if you don't know, he doesn't change. He's the same. Yesterday, today, and forever. So the same God who spoke the world into existence and shaped creation is still that same creative and powerful God, and he is still shaping things, but he's really shaping our hearts and our lives through his word, through speaking over us, through the light of his love. He's still doing that. And last week we began at the very beginning of this creation story when God spoke and said, "Let there be light." And we learned that God shines into the darkness, but not just the darkness of this world. He shines into you and me, our individual darkness in our lives. He's not afraid of the darkness in our life. He doesn't avoid it. He speaks into it. He shines his light into it. And here's why God shines his light into our life. He shines into our life to bring truth and freedom and hope. But the biggest thing is he shines into our life to light the way to something better. Like God actually has a better way for you to live. He has something better for you to chase after than what you think you were made for, and more than what the world around you says matters most. He's lighting the way to something better. And here's kind of one of our big takeaways last week, if you remember, that God calls out the beautiful potential within each one of us. In the same way that we see this world sitting and waiting, this beautiful world that's amazing right now, but in the beginning it was formless and empty, and we saw it waiting for God to speak. In the same way, you and I have so much potential in us that God wants to call out and reveal. And so last week what we learned in the very beginning, God kind of turned the lights on, right? And as he turned the lights on, he saw that there were some things that needed to be put in order. And so he went to work. Let's pick up where we left off last week, Genesis chapter 1. Let's begin reading in verse 6. It says, "Then God said, 'Let there be a space between the waters, to separate the waters of the heavens from the waters of the earth.' And that is what happened." I love that. It's kind of a recurring thing that when God says something, that's just what happens. I love that. There's no question. God's that amazing and powerful. He said it, and that's what happened. God made this space to separate the waters of the earth from the waters of the heavens. God called the space sky, and evening passed and morning came, marking the second day. Then God said, "Let the waters beneath the sky flow together into one place, so dry ground may appear." And look, that is what happened. Verse 10, God called the dry ground land and the waters seas, and God saw that it was good. So what does this have to do with you and me? Well, what happens is that God spoke light, and then he looks at this formless world in the light that he had just spoken into existence. And here's what he saw. He saw not bad things, but he saw misplaced things, disorganized things, out of order things. There wasn't anything wrong with the waters. They were just out of order, out of place. Was there anything wrong with what was in the earth? It wasn't the contents of the earth that created chaos. It was the disorganization of the things in the earth that created chaos. And the very first thing that God did in creation after saying, "Let there be light," was to bring structure and order and design to the world. Because things in the earth, they weren't bad things. They were just out of place. They were just out of order. I'm not sure what's causing that. If I should switch to a different mic, or I don't know. It was out of order things. And in much the same way, things in our life, sometimes things in our life can get out of place and out of order. And when that happens, that's when life can begin to feel chaotic. And I want to give you a few examples of things that can maybe get out of place or out of order in our lives, and maybe you'll relate to one or more of these. Maybe for you, it's your time or your schedule. Maybe you just don't have a control on your schedule. Maybe you stay up too late, and so you're always exhausted because you have no structure to be able to go to sleep at night, go to bed at night. And so you just stay up too late. And so you're always exhausted, always feeling worn out. Or maybe it's not your sleep schedule. Maybe it's just that you have too much. And so school and sports and work and your social life, they're all competing. And so you feel like you have no margin. You live under this constant stress and you're never slowing down. So there's no space to stop and think or breathe or pray. Being busy isn't necessarily a bad thing. But when the events and activities of our life run everything, it's out of order. It becomes chaotic. Maybe for you, it's not your schedule, but maybe what you could relate to is that it's maybe your phone, the technology, your screens that you're on, social media, that maybe your phone is controlling your attention. It's a constant distraction leading to constant anxiety because there's constant comparison. You're comparing yourself to the influencers online or your friends that are posting their highlight reel that looks better than your highlight reel. And maybe social media and the influencers online and the people you're watching online, maybe they're the ones that are shaping your identity instead of God's truth. And you're chasing approval and likes and follows and validation. Or maybe it's not social media for you. Maybe it's just entertainment. That entertainment is filling every single quiet moment in your life. And so you've got no space to quiet down, to reflect, to pray, to talk to God. You see, technology, it isn't evil. But when it takes the first spot in our life, it disorders our life. When your device is the very first thing you look at in the morning and the last thing you look at before you go to sleep, it fills too much space in our life. Maybe it's not schedules and phones for you. Maybe it's your emotions. Maybe you live feeling like your emotions are leading your decisions, that you're controlled by your emotions instead of the other way around. You find yourself always reacting to things instead of being able to intentionally respond to things. Maybe you live under constant stress or anxiety, and it makes it feel like every single decision is overwhelming and urgent and life-altering. And so you always feel overwhelmed. You never feel at peace. Maybe for you, it's not stress and anxiety. Maybe for you, you've got some anger issues, some frustration stuff. Maybe you've got some things that have happened to you in life that you don't know how to deal with or process. And so under the surface, you're always a little bit angry and frustrated. And what you find happening is that you're maybe lashing out at people or snapping at people or pulling away from relationships. And our emotions, your emotions are God-given. God gave you those emotions. But our emotions are meant to be guides, not gods. They're supposed to help us process life, not lead us in life. And when they get out of order, it makes our life feel chaotic. Maybe for you, it's your relationships. Maybe you're at the age where you really want to date. Maybe you are dating, and maybe just maybe that relationship has become more than just a dating relationship. It's become identity defining. That your entire mood, everything you feel and think about yourself, it rises and falls on one person, which isn't healthy. I mean, it's natural to want to like somebody and want to be liked by somebody, but if you let your whole self-worth rise and fall on what one person thinks and says about you, that can be dangerous. Or maybe it's not dating, maybe it's just your friendships. That your friendships are driving your choices instead of your values driving your choices. That you end up doing things that you know aren't wise because you want to please a certain group of people. And so you say yes to things that you know that you should say no to. Relationships are important and God-given, but when they're the wrong relationships or they're out of order in our life, they can create chaos. Yeah, let me grab that mic. Or maybe for you, it's just your priorities. Maybe you find yourself placing success as the ultimate goal in your life. The most important thing to you is succeeding and winning and making lots of money and proving to people that you can do it. And so you've placed success even above character. And what ends up happening in your life is that leads to so much pressure and burnout and fear of failure. Maybe you've allowed yourself to place approval of others above everything else. That you want what people think about you to matter most, even above your obedience to God. And you end up hiding parts of yourself because you don't want people to know. You want people to like you and accept you. And so you can't be honest about what you're struggling with. You're always worrying about the future and what's next. Even good goals. It's good to have goals. But even good goals can create chaos in our life if they're out of order. There's lots of things in our life that aren't necessarily bad in themselves, but if they're just out of place, they can create chaos. And here's what happened in Genesis chapter 1. In Genesis 1, where we're reading today, as God looked at this chaotic, out of order world, here is how he brought order and peace. He brought order and peace not by removing things, but by putting them in their proper place. By reorganizing things according to his perfect design. And in the same way, please hear me. What God wants for you is he does not want to wreck your life or ruin your life. He wants to reorder your life. He does not want to take good things from you. He just wants to rebuild your life around his perfect design because that is for your good. It is what is best for us. You see, God doesn't just shine his light into our life and show us what's wrong. If we let him, God will reorder and rebuild and redesign our life according to his wisdom. Now, of course, God does want to remove bad things from our life. If we have sin or harmful behaviors, God wants to take that away from us because he cares about us. He doesn't want us to hurt ourselves, but he's not just in the business of taking things away. He's not just in the business of saying no to bad things. He also wants to completely reorder and restructure your life around his perfect plan and design, around what is best for you and best for me. Here's kind of the tie-in between last week. Last week we discovered that God's light reveals who we are. It shines into our life and it lights toward a better way, a perfect design. It shows who we are. But this week what we're looking at is that God's wisdom and design reveals how we ought to live in order to become who he wants us to be. That he has a perfect plan for us, but he's inviting us to structure our life around his design so we can become who he wants us to be. But we have to respond to that. Here's the biggest distinction, because obviously we're looking at the creation account, right? And we're talking about how that parallels God's work in our lives. But here's an important distinction. In the creation story, the earth is a passive participant in the process. The earth can't say no to God. It's just a lump of earth. And God speaks and says, let there be light and divide the waters and let there be plants and let there be animals. And it just is. It must be so. Because the earth was a passive participant, but we're not. You see, God initiates change in our life. He goes first. He loved us first. He took the first step. And he invites us out of chaos into clarity. But we must respond. There's an invitation for us to come out of darkness into light, out of chaos into order. But we have to respond to that invitation. And here's one of the ways that we respond according to Solomon, one of the wisest men to ever live, in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Here's what he writes. He says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will, God's will, in all you do, and what? He will show you which path to take. Do you see the progression here? The invitation first is to trust God, to center your life on what he says is best, to trust him with all your heart, to build your life on what he says matters most. To rely on him and his ways and his goodness, to not depend on ourselves. You know, if we're honest all the time, constantly, I'm guilty of it too. We are constantly thinking that we know better than God, or we can do it on our own, or I can figure it out. I am always, far too often, trusting on, leaning on, relying on my own understanding, my own strength. But what Solomon writes here is, trust in God with all your heart. Don't depend on yourself. Seek his way. Structure your life around his design. Build your life the way he wants it to be. And when you do that, he will show you which path to take. You see, this is backwards from what we think. There's so many people that I've met that I say, man, if God would just speak to me, if he would just tell me his plan for my life, then I would trust him. And Solomon says, no, flip that. Trust God first. Believe he knows best. And when you do that, he will show you which path to take. He will lead you. He will reveal his will for your life. But the question we have to wrestle with is this. do you really believe that God's ways are better? Only you can answer that question. Do you really believe that God knows better? Do you really believe that God knows better than you and that God knows better than everybody else around you that you might want to emulate or build your life like them? Do you really believe that? Do we believe it? Because if we do, we will build our life on him. We will structure our life according to his plans, his design, his ways, his will. Do we really believe? Because when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, you and I have a choice. We will either believe that God knows best, and we will believe that he is for us and he is for our good, and we will allow him to reshape and reorder our lives according to his design. Or we will choose to shape ourselves around earthly wisdom, around what we think is best, or around what everybody else is doing. That's really the choice. Do we really believe God's ways are better? If we do, we'll trust him, we'll let him shape our life, or we will choose to do it on our own or conform or shape our life around what everybody else is doing. And you know, the Apostle Paul speaks directly to this tension in Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Here's what he says. He says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. Some translation says, don't be conformed to this world. Don't shape yourself around what everybody else is doing. Don't shape yourself around the norm, the status quo, the influencer model, what the person that you think is amazing is doing. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. Instead, do what? Let God transform you, let him shape you into a new person. How? By changing the way you think. The first step for us is thinking differently. Just like Solomon said, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Build your life around his ways. Stop leaning on yourself. Stop doing it in your own strength, but trust his wisdom and his ways. Paul comes along and affirms that and says, hey, don't copy the world. Don't try to do it on your own. Don't follow the crowds. Don't follow the trends. Let God shape you. And here's how he changes you. He will first change the way you think. Do you really believe God knows better? Do you really think that he has the best in mind for you? Do you truly believe his ways are the best ways, and following his ways will lead you to the greatest peace, the greatest significance, the greatest satisfaction you can find? Let him transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then look at this and look at this. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Son of God, daughter of God, God has a plan for your life. He was thinking about you long before you were born. He planned things for you to do and walk in before you were even a thought. He knew you before you were formed in your mother's belly. He has plans for you, and he wants to reveal them to you. But we get it backwards sometimes. We say, well, if God would just prove himself, reveal himself, tell me what to do, tell me who I am, show me his plan for my life, then maybe I'll stop doing this, and maybe I'll follow him, and maybe I'll trust him. And you have two wise people, Solomon and Paul, both saying, no, you have it backwards. First, trust God. First, change the way you think. First, believe that he is best. First, let him transform you. First, let him build your life the way he wants to build your life. Then you will learn to know God's will. And man, it's a good plan. It's pleasing and good and perfect. We have to first change the way we think. Here's kind of how I could explain it to you in one sentence is this, that we discover God's will when we embrace God's design. If you want to know God's will for your life, do you trust him enough to embrace the way he says to live? Are you living your life according to his design? Because the way that we discover God's will is by embracing his design, by trusting him enough to actually live his way. To say, I don't care what's popular. I don't care what's trendy. I don't care what everybody else is doing. I don't care what I think is most wise. I don't care what that guy with a big bank account online says is best for me to do. I don't care what all of my friends are screaming at me to do. That's normal and fun, and give it a shot. I trust God enough. I believe his way is better. I believe his plan for me is good. And so I'm going to embrace his way of life. I'm going to do it God's way. And it won't always be easy, but I'm going to change the way I think. I'm going to see my life in light of eternity. I'm going to trust God's plan. I'm going to let him reshape my life. I'm going to let him, just like he did in creation, step in and separate the waters and make dry land and put things in their proper place. I will let him reorganize my life and my priorities. And when I do that, I know I will discover exactly who he wants me to be. I will find a truer belonging, significance, and meaning than I could ever find on my own. You know, sometimes life gets chaotic. That's just the reality of life. And let me say clearly, child of God, having chaos in your life does not mean that you're broken or bad or hopeless. Having chaos in your life often just means that some things, maybe even good things, are simply out of order. That's what disorder is. It's what happens when things, even good things, get out of their proper place. Even when our God-given desires and dreams are misplaced or misprioritized, chaos is what can come. But God, this good God that we have, wants to step in and bring order to our lives, to show us a better way to live, and to lead us toward who he wants us to be. So I have a couple of next steps for you before we close. Here's what I want to challenge you to do. Number one, I want to challenge you to ask God for clarity. You know, if I could be really honest, as embarrassing as it is, the reality is sometimes I come up against difficult situations and I jump straight into figure it out mode. And I get hours, even days down the road and realize, man, I didn't pray about that. I just went to work. I just got busy. I just figured it out in my own strength. You know how many times we have an opportunity just to pause, and if we really believe God is as real and as good as he says he is, why don't we talk to him more about what we're struggling with? If you feel like there's chaos in your life, if you feel like you don't know who you are or what's next, if you feel like some things are out of order or out of place, the first thing I want to challenge you to do is talk to God about it. Pause this week and say, God, would you bring clarity? Would you cut through the noise and even the lies? Would you shine your light into my life? And would you come in and begin to help me put things in order? Would you reorder my life? Bring clarity, God. Ask God for clarity. And then as you ask God for clarity, expect he's going to answer, and then take this next step. Here's my next challenge for you. I want to challenge you to reorder your habits, your priorities, and your relationships according to God's design. Remember, the first thing we do is we trust God and we rely on him. The first thing we do is we change the way we think. The first thing we do is we take steps of obedience, and that's when God transforms us and reveals his will and shows us which way to take, which path to take. So I want to challenge you to ask God for clarity, but as he begins to bring clarity, take intentional steps to reorder your life. Change up your habits. One thing I had to do many years ago is to leave my phone next to the bed after I get up for the first long chunk of the morning. Not touch it. You know how freeing that is? Instead of immediately touching it and jumping into emails and news and whatever else distracts me, just leave it. Walk away from it. Go read the Bible. Go pray. Go spend time with your family. Go be present. What other habits do you have that you know are not healthy for you? Maybe it's even something as simple as your sleep habits. Sleep more. Rest more. Don't always have to be at everything and do everything. Restructure your habits, your priorities. Is God just somewhere on your list, or is he first on your list? Your relationships. Are there some relationships that you know are unhealthy and you know dealing with it is going to be so rough, but you know you need to? Would you be bold enough to not just pray and talk to God about it, but would you take steps to reorder your habits, your priorities, and your relationships, not around what's comfortable, convenient, or popular, but around God's design? We're going to pray here in a second, then we're going to go into small groups. I would love for you guys to talk this out, really take some actionable steps this week to see God bring clarity in the chaos, to reorganize and restructure your life according to design, to show you who he's designed you to be. Let's pray.